Welcome to the Haunted Tales, where the shadows whisper and the roads never truly end. Tonight, we take a dark journey down the most haunted roads in California. Twisting highways where ghosts wander, spectral hitchhikers wait for a ride that never comes, and eerie cries pierce the silence of the night. Buckle up and keep your eyes on the road, because sometimes the things lurking in the darkness are much closer than you think. The ghostly hitchhiker of Highway 99. The vanishing passenger. Highway 99 was a long stretch of road that cut through the heart of California, running through small towns, forgotten motels, and gas stations clinging to life. It had its share of history, both good and bad. Accidents happened frequently, and some claimed the road was cursed. Truckers swapped stories of strange happenings, but none were more chilling than the legend of the ghostly hitchhiker. On a cool autumn night, Mark Evans was making his way down Highway 99. He was returning from a business trip in Sacramento, eager to get home to his wife and newborn daughter in Bakersfield. The night was quiet, the road stretching endlessly before him, lined with old trees and occasional signs for diners that had long since shut down. As he passed through a particularly dark stretch near an abandoned rest stop, he saw her. A young woman in a white dress standing on the shoulder, her hair cascading down her back. Her pale arm was extended, thumb out, waiting for a ride. Mark slowed down, debating whether he should stop. Something about her felt off. But it was late, and leaving a lone woman stranded on the highway didn't sit right with him. He pulled over. As she approached the car, Mark noticed how cold the air had become. His breath misted in front of him, something that hadn't happened before he stopped. The woman got in without a word and sat rigidly, hands folded in her lap. "Where are you headed?" Mark asked. She looked at him with large, sorrowful eyes. "Home." He nodded, merging back onto the highway. "Where's home?" "Just down the road. You'll know when we get there." Something about her voice sent a shiver down his spine. It was soft, almost melodic, but tinged with an ancient sadness. He turned up the heat in the car, but it did nothing to dispel the chill that had settled in. As they drove, she remained silent, staring out the window. When Mark glanced at the rearview mirror, he swore he saw her reflection waver, as if she weren't entirely there. His hands tightened on the wheel. "You okay?" he asked, trying to keep his voice even. She nodded. "Almost home." And then, just as they passed an old wooden sign that read "Welcome to Kingsburg," she vanished. The seat beside him was empty, the air suddenly warm again. Mark slammed on the brakes, heart pounding, sweat breaking out on his brow. He turned to look back, but the road was empty. His hands trembled as he pulled into the nearest gas station. The clerk, an older man with graying hair, noticed his pale face and shaken demeanor. "You saw her, didn't you?" the clerk asked knowingly. Mark swallowed. "The woman on the road. Who is she?" The clerk sighed, leaning on the counter. "She's been hitchhiking on this highway for decades. Some say she was a young woman killed in a car accident back in the 50s. Others say she was murdered and dumped on the roadside. Either way, she always asks to go home, but she never makes it there." Mark left the gas station feeling like he had stepped into a nightmare. He had always dismissed ghost stories as nonsense, but now he wasn't so sure. The curse of Turnbull Canyon, an expanse of rugged wilderness nestled between the cities of Whittier and Hacienda Heights, California, has long been the subject of whispered legends. Locals speak of spirits that roam its shadowed trails, of satanic rituals performed beneath the eerie glow of a full moon, and of an ominous force lurking in its canyons, waiting for unsuspecting souls to trespass into its domain. For decades, those who dared to enter at night either never returned or emerged forever changed, their minds fractured by the horrors they claimed to have witnessed. The story begins with four friends, Daniel, Lisa, Mark, and Jessica, who had all grown up in Whittier, hearing the tales of Turnbull Canyon since childhood. On Halloween night, emboldened by youthful arrogance and the desire to debunk old superstitions, they made a pact. They would venture deep into the canyon, armed with flashlights and cameras, to prove once and for all that the stories were nothing more than urban legends. "We'll be fine," Daniel assured the group as they parked near the canyon's entrance. "People just like scaring themselves." Lisa, skeptical yet intrigued, adjusted her backpack. "Then let's get this over with." As they crossed into the canyon, the night air grew thick with an unnatural chill. The deeper they walked, the more the trees seemed to lean inward, enclosing them in a tunnel of gnarled branches. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying with it whispers, at first barely discernible, then increasingly distinct. "Leave!" the wind seemed to sigh. "Turn back!" Jessica clutched Mark's arm. "Did you hear that?" Mark laughed nervously. "It's just the wind." But they all heard it, a collective unease settling over them like a dense fog. Still, they pressed on. The hanging tree. After nearly an hour of trekking, they arrived at a twisted, ancient oak, its branches stark against the moonlit sky. Legend spoke of this as the hanging tree, a place where, in the early 1900s, an entire family was lynched by a mysterious cult that once resided in the canyon. Some said their spirits never left, bound eternally to the cursed ground where their last breaths were stolen. Daniel, always the skeptic, scoffed. "It's just a tree. Come on, let's take a picture." The moment his camera flashed, an unearthly wail erupted from the darkness. The wind lashed violently around them, and the temperature dropped so suddenly that their breaths came out in thick clouds. Then, Lisa screamed. Jessica turned, her heart hammering. "What? What is it?" Lisa was staring at the screen of her phone, the picture they had just taken. The image showed the four of them standing in front of the tree, but there was a fifth figure, a shadowy, faceless entity looming behind them. The lost children panic set in. "We need to go. Now." Mark's voice was sharp with fear. But the canyon would not let them leave so easily. As they turned back, the path that had been so clear just minutes ago was now obscured by thick fog. The trees around them groaned, as if alive, their limbs shifting and twisting when no one was looking directly at them. Then came the laughter, high-pitched, childlike giggles echoing from the depths of the fog. "Who's there?" Daniel called out, his bravado cracking. Shapes emerged from the mist, small, ghostly figures of children, their eyes hollow voids of darkness. Their voices overlapped, whispering in a language long forgotten, beckoning the group to follow them deeper into the canyon. Jessica sobbed. "We have to run!" But as they turned, the children screamed, a shrill, deafening sound that rattled their bones. The ground beneath them trembled, and a force unseen sent them crashing to the dirt. The cult of the canyon. When the echoes of the children's cries faded, the fog parted slightly, revealing a clearing they hadn't seen before. In the center stood the ruins of an old, abandoned building, the remains of an insane asylum that had burned down decades ago. It was said that the asylum's patients, left to die in the flames, still haunted the land, their suffering woven into the very fabric of the canyon. A single lantern flickered in the distance. Then, figures emerged, robed, faceless, moving with an unnatural grace. The cult, Lisa gasped. The stories were true. As one, the cultists raised their hands and began chanting in a guttural, inhuman tongue. The earth trembled, and from the shadows beyond the ruins, something massive began to stir. A pair of eyes, burning like embers, snapped open in the darkness. Something ancient had awakened. The escape, or not, chaos erupted. The cultists advanced, their voices rising into a crescendo. The ground split apart, revealing skeletal remains clawing their way to the surface. A force stronger than any human comprehension took hold of the four friends, dragging them toward the abyss. Daniel fought against it, screaming, "We have to run! We have to!" A shadow fell over him. And then he was gone. Lisa's screams echoed through the canyon as she was pulled into the chasm, vanishing into the darkness. Mark and Jessica, hands clasped tightly, ran blindly through the fog, the shrieks of their friends still ringing in their ears. They didn't stop, not even when the canyon itself seemed to shift beneath their feet. Somehow, miraculously, they reached the road. Gasping, bleeding, and barely alive, they collapsed onto the pavement. The canyon behind them was silent once more, as if nothing had ever happened. The authorities found no trace of Daniel or Lisa. No footprints, no evidence of struggle, nothing. The official report stated that they were missing, but Mark and Jessica knew the truth. Turnbull Canyon had claimed 2 more souls that night, and it was still hungry. The phantom of Ortega Highway. The winding stretch of Ortega Highway, officially known as California State Route 74, was infamous for its sharp turns, steep cliffs, and eerie silence after sundown. For decades, whispers of a ghostly figure haunting the road spread among late-night travelers, truck drivers, and bikers who dared to ride its perilous curves alone. The first encounter. Jason Carter had driven the Ortega Highway countless times before, but this night was different. It was past midnight, and the mist rolled in thick, shrouding the road like a burial shroud. His fingers tightened around the wheel as his headlights barely cut through the dense fog. As he rounded a bend, a flickering light appeared in the distance. It was the glow of a single headlamp, an old motorcycle, stationary on the side of the road. A figure stood beside it, shrouded in a tattered leather jacket and a cracked helmet. Jason slowed his car instinctively, the hair on his arms rising. He pulled up beside the stranded motorcyclist, rolling down his window. "Hey, man! Need some help?" Jason called out. The figure turned its head slowly, revealing a shadowed face obscured by the darkness. The helmet's visor was cracked, and through the break, Jason glimpsed hollow, empty eye sockets. His heart stopped. Before he could react, the figure vanished. The motorcycle remained, rusted and decrepit, as if abandoned for decades. Jason slammed his foot on the gas and sped away, his pulse hammering in his ears. The legend. The next morning, Jason recounted his experience to his friend Eric, a lifelong resident of San Juan Capistrano. "You saw him," Eric said grimly, setting down his coffee. The phantom of Ortega Highway. Jason scoffed. Come on, man. It was probably just my imagination. Or some abandoned bike. Eric shook his head. There's an old story. Back in the 70s, a biker named Roy Grayson was racing a friend down Ortega at night. He lost control on one of the sharpest turns near Dead Man's Curve and went flying off the cliff. They never found his body. Only his bike, smashed to pieces on the rocks below. Jason swallowed. And now he haunts the road? Eric nodded. They say he appears to people who drive alone at night. Some see his headlamp flickering in the rearview mirror, chasing them. Others see him standing on the side of the road, just like you did. But those who stop to help him. Eric hesitated. Jason leaned in. What happens to them? They disappear. The dare determined to prove it was all just superstition. Jason decided to return to Ortega Highway the following night. Armed with his phone and a GoPro strapped to his dashboard, he set out at midnight. The road was empty, save for the occasional nocturnal creature darting across his path. He drove past Dead Man's Curve, eyes scanning the roadside. For an hour, he saw nothing. Just as he was about to turn back, his radio crackled with static. Then, a voice, faint, distant, whispered his name. Jason's hands tightened on the wheel. Hello? He called, glancing at the radio screen. It was blank. A sudden chill filled the car. His headlights flickered, and when they stabilized, a figure stood in the middle of the road ahead. The motorcyclist. Jason swerved violently, skidding onto the shoulder. His car stalled, and the headlights dimmed. Heart pounding, he fumbled for his phone. The figure stood unmoving, staring. Then, it took a step forward. Jason scrambled to restart the car, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The figure stepped closer, the sound of heavy boots scraping against the pavement. Jason's fingers found the ignition. The headlights flickered once more. The phantom was gone. The rest of the night was a blur. Jason drove home in silence, refusing to look in the rearview mirror. When he checked his GoPro footage the next morning, the road was empty. But just before the footage cut off, a voice whispered, "The Vanishing Children of Proctor Valley Road." A road with a history. Proctor Valley Road was more than just an unpaved, winding stretch of asphalt cutting through the California countryside. It was a place of whispered warnings and childhood dares, where generations of locals spoke in hushed tones about the eerie occurrences that had plagued the area for decades. Some said it was cursed land, tainted by the blood of those who had once lived there. Others believed the stories of wandering spirits, seeking revenge or release. But nothing had cemented its reputation in terror quite like the tales of the vanishing children. For nearly a century, children had disappeared along Proctor Valley Road without a trace. No evidence, no suspects, no explanations. And every time another child was lost, the town of Jamul collectively held its breath, wondering if the curse had claimed another soul. The first disappearances, the first recorded vanishing, had been in 1923, when young Abigail Turner was walking home from school. She was only 6 years old, her blonde pigtails bouncing as she skipped along the road's dusty path. When she didn't arrive home, her parents formed a search party, scouring the valley well into the night. All they found was one of her shoes, lying perfectly in the center of the road. Then there was Jacob Hernandez in 1948. He was last seen playing with his dog near the old oak tree on the road's eastern bend. His dog returned home hours later, whimpering, covered in dirt and scratches. Jacob was never seen again. The stories continued. The missing added up. And yet, there were never any signs of struggle, no bodies, no clues, just a growing sense of dread that Proctor Valley Road was swallowing children whole. The investigation that led nowhere. In the summer of 1986, Detective Samuel Holloway made it his mission to solve the mystery of Proctor Valley Road. A skeptic by nature, he refused to believe in ghost stories. To him, there had to be a logical explanation, a hidden predator, a secret underground network, something. He combed through old police reports, spoke with the grieving families, and even camped out on the road several nights in a row. But all he ever encountered was an unnatural silence, an absence of the usual night sounds one would expect in the countryside. No crickets, no owls, not even the rustling of the wind. Just an oppressive stillness that made his skin crawl. Then, on his fifth night of surveillance, his radio crackled with static. And in that static, he swore he heard children laughing. The next morning, Holloway was gone. His cruiser was found parked at the side of the road, door wide open. His gun, badge, and radio were inside. The engine was still running. But Holloway himself had disappeared, becoming another name on the long list of those claimed by Proctor Valley Road. The survivors' stories: there were a few who had come close to vanishing but had somehow managed to escape. They spoke of strange figures lurking in the trees, shadows with no source, voices calling their names from the darkness. Tina Mallory, who was 16 when she had her brush with the unknown, recalled driving down the road late at night when she saw a small child standing in the middle of the road. She slammed on the brakes, her heart pounding. The child turned its head toward her, and Tina swore she saw its eyes, completely black, void of pupils or whites. Then it smiled, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. She screamed, flooring the gas pedal. But as she passed the spot where the child had stood, there was nothing there. Only laughter, echoing through the night. The curse deepens. The disappearances continued, stretching into the modern day. Parents forbade their children from going near the road. But curiosity was a dangerous thing, and every few years, another child would be lost. Some believed that Proctor Valley Road was a thin place, a point where the veil between worlds was weaker. Others said it was haunted by the spirits of those who had been wronged long ago, demanding retribution in the form of innocent lives. Whatever the truth, one fact remained: children who walked Proctor Valley Road alone never came back. The hellhound of Black Star Canyon. Black Star Canyon, a remote and eerie stretch of land located in the Santa Ana Mountains, has long been whispered about in local legends. Darkened by ancient trees, haunted by strange sounds, and shrouded in mystery, it is known for its many eerie occurrences. The most terrifying of them all is the legend of the hellhound, a creature said to haunt the canyon under the cover of night, waiting for the next unlucky soul to cross its path. The origins of the hellhound. The story begins with a young historian named Emily who, after hearing rumors from locals, becomes fascinated by the dark history of Black Star Canyon. She dives into old records, talking to locals, and uncovering stories of eerie disappearances and unsettling happenings. The most persistent and disturbing tale is about a hellhound, a beast so terrifying that it is said to guard the canyon from anyone who dares enter. The legend dates back to the early 1800s, during the California Gold Rush. It is said that an outlaw named Black Star, who had been hiding in the canyon with his band of criminals, was cursed by a Native American shaman after a massacre. The curse transformed the outlaw into a monstrous hellhound. Now, the creature roams the canyon, forever hunting the souls of those who venture too close. The call of the canyon. Emily is determined to uncover the truth. She sets out on a journey with her childhood friend, Luke, a local who knows the canyon well. As they walk deeper into the canyon, they notice strange occurrences, distorted sounds, odd movements in the shadows, and a sudden chill in the air. Emily dismisses these signs, but Luke feels something ominous lurking nearby. They stop to camp for the night, unaware that they are being watched by the hellhound. As dusk turns into night, Emily hears the distant howl of an animal, which echoes through the canyon. The sound sends a chill down her spine, and she wonders if the legends of the hellhound might be true after all. The first encounter that night, Emily has a terrifying vision. In the vision, she sees a large, glowing pair of eyes watching her from the darkness. When she wakes up, Luke is gone. Panic sets in as she frantically searches for him, calling out his name. But instead of Luke, she hears an unsettling growl that seems to come from all directions. Suddenly, the ground shakes, and the hellhound emerges from the shadows, a massive, hulking creature with glowing red eyes, razor-sharp teeth, and fur as black as night. Emily runs for her life, realizing that she is now the target of the hellhound's rage. She barely escapes the canyon, but Luke is nowhere to be found. The hellhound's curse is real, and it has marked her as its next victim. The truth revealed back in town, Emily becomes obsessed with finding out more about the hellhound. She interviews local elders and historians, piecing together more details about the creature's curse. It turns out that the hellhound's original form, Black Star, was not simply a criminal. He was a man consumed by greed and violence, a man who made a pact with dark forces in exchange for power and immortality. However, the price of his immortality was the transformation into the terrifying creature that now stalks Black Star Canyon. As Emily continues her research, she learns that the curse can only be broken by confronting the hellhound in its lair and confronting the spirit of Black Star himself. This requires her to return to the canyon, a place where few have survived, and even fewer have returned from. Into the heart of darkness, determined to save Luke and stop the hellhound once and for all, Emily returns to Black Star Canyon. She gathers supplies and enlists the help of other brave locals, but none of them are prepared for what lies ahead. As they venture deeper into the canyon, they face more terrifying encounters with the hellhound, mysterious whispers in the wind, sudden drops in temperature, and the overwhelming sense of being watched. The closer they get to the heart of the canyon, the more desperate they become. Emily's memories of her last encounter with the hellhound haunt her. Every sound, every movement, every shadow seems to be the creature closing in on her. The final showdown at the heart of Black Star Canyon, Emily confronts the hellhound in a climactic battle. Armed with only the knowledge she's gathered about the curse, she uses the power of the ancient rituals of the Native American shaman who first cursed Black Star. The confrontation is brutal, as the hellhound reveals its true power, its supernatural strength, ferocity, and unholy fury. But Emily is determined. She confronts Black Star, whose spirit is trapped within the hellhound. The battle reaches its peak as Emily faces the true evil behind the curse, and the fate of the canyon, and her own life, hangs in the balance. Redemption and release. The final moments of the battle are tense. Emily, relying on her wits and the knowledge she's gained, manages to break the curse. As the hellhound fades into nothingness, so does the spirit of Black Star, freed from his torment. The canyon, once a place of horror, begins to calm, and the eerie sense of dread lifts. Emily and the remaining survivors return to the town, forever changed by their ordeal. Luke is found, alive but shaken. The curse is broken, but the legend of the hellhound lives on in the memories of those who dared venture into Black Star Canyon. Epilogue. The legacy of the hellhound. Years later, Emily reflects on her journey. The story of the hellhound of Black Star Canyon continues to be told, though the creature is no longer a threat. But deep in the canyon, some believe that the hellhound's spirit lingers, waiting for the next unwitting soul to challenge its dominion. The canyon remains a place of mystery, where dark shadows and ancient secrets still stir. The death car of Route 666, now Route 491. There are highways that are nothing more than simple roads to travel on, connecting towns and cities, stretching out over miles and miles of asphalt. And then there are highways that seem to be alive, roads with histories of darkness, blood, and tragedy. Route 666, later renumbered to Route 491, was one such road. Stretching through the desolate deserts of New Mexico, Colorado, and Arizona, it had earned its reputation as the Devil's Highway, due to the strange occurrences and deadly accidents that had plagued it for decades. The legend of the death car was one of the most chilling stories attached to the road. It was said that on certain dark, lonely nights, a car would appear on the horizon, headlights blazing, engine roaring, only to vanish when it drew close. But the real terror came not from the car itself, but from the shadowy figure that seemed to be behind the wheel, a figure that no one could quite make out, yet the sense of impending doom was unmistakable. People who had seen it often spoke of an overwhelming sense of terror, of knowing they were being followed, of something far darker than just a car on the road. Catherine Yassick had heard the stories, of course. A trucker who had driven across the Southwest for nearly 2 decades, she had grown accustomed to the dark, empty stretches of road that dotted the landscape. She'd heard about the death car, but like most truckers, she dismissed it as just another one of those ghost stories people like to tell at rest stops. That was until the night she found herself on Route 491. Catherine was nearing the end of her long haul, the hum of her truck's engine the only sound accompanying her through the desolate stretch of highway. It was just past midnight, the desert landscape stretching out on either side of her like an ocean of sand and silence. She had no intention of stopping. There were no gas stations or rest areas for miles, just the empty road and the fading stars overhead. As she drove, her headlights swept across the desert, illuminating nothing but barren earth and the occasional scraggly bush. Then, in the distance, she saw it, a set of headlights, far off but growing closer with alarming speed. Catherine frowned, tapping the brakes slightly as the figure of a car began to materialize. It was strange, though. The car seemed to be moving too quickly for its size, its headlights far too bright for a normal vehicle. And strangely, it seemed to be headed directly toward her. She accelerated slightly, thinking the car was just speeding on a long stretch of road. But as the minutes ticked by, the vehicle didn't fade into the distance as it should have. Instead, it kept pace with her, staying just out of sight in her rearview mirror, never gaining ground, but never falling behind. Then it happened. The lights of the car grew brighter, the engine's roar reverberating through her truck as if the car was right behind her. Catherine's heart skipped a beat as her grip tightened on the wheel. The road was empty. There were no other cars for miles. And yet, the unmistakable sound of an engine revving sent chills down her spine. Suddenly, the rearview mirror reflected the unmistakable shape of the car. It was right there, behind her, but there was no one inside. Just the eerie, empty seat and a faint shadow in the driver's spot, obscured in darkness. Catherine's blood ran cold. She slammed her foot on the gas, the truck speeding up as she tried to outpace the phantom car. But no matter how fast she went, it stayed with her, as if tethered to the road by some unseen force. Her truck swerved, nearly colliding with the side of the highway, as the ghostly car seemed to close in. The headlights flared brighter, almost blinding her. It was as if the death car was trying to force her off the road. Catherine's pulse raced as she fought to maintain control, but the world around her seemed to distort. The horizon bent unnaturally, the stars flickering like faulty lights. The road ahead appeared endless, an unbroken path into the unknown. There you have it, the most haunted roads in California. Would you dare drive down any of them alone at night? Or will you keep your headlights bright and your doors locked tight? Remember, the spirits of these roads are always watching, and sometimes they follow you home. If you enjoyed this spine-chilling journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because here on the Haunted Tales, the darkness never sleeps.